My friends, life has a way of humbling us. We enter this world believing we can mold, manage, and manipulate every detail of our journey. We cling to plans, to people, to outcomes, convinced that if we just hold tight enough, life will bend in our favor. And yet the truth we discover, sometimes painfully, is that so much is beyond our control. The more we tighten our grip, the more we exhaust ourselves, and the more we miss the beauty of simply being alive. Letting go is not about giving up. It is about creating the space for growth, for joy, for peace, and for the life we were meant to live. Letting go is an act of vulnerability. It requires us to stand in the unknown, to accept uncertainty, and to acknowledge that we cannot force the future. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form, because it takes courage to release what we cannot change. We are conditioned to believe that control equals safety, but what we really find is that control often equals anxiety, burnout, and disappointment. True safety comes when we allow ourselves to breathe, to trust, to believe that life can unfold even without our constant intervention. There is a deep courage in surrender. To surrender is to unclench the fist and to say, I may not know what's next, but I am willing to trust that it will be okay. It is not passive resignation. It is active faith. It is believing that growth is not found in clinging to what was, but in making room for what could be. Every season of life asks us to let go of something, the job we've outgrown, the relationship that no longer nurtures us, the expectations we once placed upon ourselves. When we resist, we stagnate. When we release, we allow transformation to take root. Growth rarely happens in the moments when everything is certain. It happens in the spaces between, the waiting rooms of life, where answers have not yet arrived and clarity has not yet formed. We want to rush through these seasons, to force the outcome, to demand resolution. But it is in this very space that life is doing its quiet work. When we stop trying to force open doors that are meant to remain closed, we begin to notice the windows that were opening all along. Letting go is how we move from surviving to thriving, from control to trust, from fear to freedom. And that freedom, oh, what a gift it is. When we finally release what drains us, we discover just how much energy we have been carrying in vain. Holding on to resentment, to fear, to control, to what ifs keeps us shackled. But when we lay it down, we discover joy again. We laugh easier. We breathe deeper. We reconnect with ourselves and with those around us. Letting go is not losing. It is choosing to prioritize our peace over our pain, our growth over our grief, our freedom over our fear. Finally, letting go teaches us to choose wholeness over perfection. Perfection tells us that we must have life neatly packaged, every piece under control, every answer clear. Wholeness tells us that life is messy, unpredictable, and beautifully human, and that it is enough. We do not need control to be worthy, to be loved, or to live a meaningful life. We only need the courage to release what we cannot carry, and the wisdom to hold on to what truly matters. So today, I invite you to ask yourself, what are you gripping so tightly that it's keeping you from growing? What would it look like to surrender, to trust, and to open yourself to the possibility of something new? Letting go does not mean the end. It means making space for a beginning. Because in releasing what we can't control, we discover the power, the freedom, and the courage to grow into who we were always meant to be. When we talk about letting go, the very first wall we encounter within ourselves is vulnerability. Most of us have been taught from an early age that vulnerability is weakness. We grow up believing that if we show uncertainty, fear, or softness, people will take advantage of us, or worse, they will see us as inadequate. And so, we create armor. We try to control everything around us, our circumstances, our relationships, even our emotions, because we think that if we can keep a tight grip on things, we will never be exposed, never be hurt, and never be seen as less than strong. But the truth is, real strength is not found in control. Real strength is found in the willingness to be vulnerable. It is in the openness to stand in uncertainty and say, I don't have it all figured out, but I am willing to trust that I am enough. That kind of strength is not forged in safety, but in courage. Letting go requires us to step into this very courage. When you release what you cannot control, you expose yourself to the unknown. You allow yourself to live in a space where things may not go the way you planned, where outcomes are uncertain, where your heart may be tested, and where your resilience is stretched. This is the space of vulnerability, and rather than being a weakness, it is the space where growth actually begins. Vulnerability is the birthplace of growth, creativity, love, and change. Without it, we are simply clinging to the familiar, holding tight to patterns that no longer serve us, suffocating under the illusion that safety equals control. But what good is safety if it robs us of the chance to truly live? Think about the times in your life when you have grown the most. Chances are, those moments were not when you had everything under control, neatly organized, with certainty mapped out step by step. No. The times you grew the most were likely when life disrupted your plans, when something you clung to slipped through your fingers, when you stood in the unknown, terrified but open, and somehow you survived. Vulnerability was the doorway through which you walked, and though you may not have chosen it willingly, it became the catalyst for your transformation. It is in these moments that we discover the paradox of vulnerability. It feels like exposure, but it reveals our strength. It feels like weakness, but it becomes our power. It feels terrifying, but it is where courage is born. There is an incredible freedom that comes with admitting, I cannot control this. We resist those words because they make us feel small. We think that if we acknowledge our lack of control, we are giving up. But in truth, letting go of control is not giving up. It is giving into life. It is recognizing that vulnerability is not the absence of strength, but the presence of it. It is the strength to accept that we are human, that we are limited, and that we do not need to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders to prove our worth. We don't need to control every detail of life to deserve love or belonging. What we need is to stand in the space of uncertainty and trust that we are enough just as we are. When we resist vulnerability, we close ourselves off. We avoid hard conversations because they make us uncomfortable. We avoid risks because they could lead to failure. We avoid love because it might bring heartbreak. We avoid change because it could bring loss. But what we fail to realize is that in avoiding vulnerability, we also avoid growth. We avoid intimacy, joy, and the kind of breakthroughs that can only happen when we step beyond our armor. Letting go is an act of vulnerability, and it is an invitation to step into life more fully. When you let go, you admit that you don't know what's next. That is vulnerable. When you let go, you admit that something is beyond your control. That is vulnerable. When you let go, you say, I don't have all the answers, but I am willing to keep moving. That is vulnerable. And yet, in that vulnerability, you are stronger than you have ever been. Because it takes courage to keep moving when you cannot see the whole road ahead. Many people mistake control for strength. They believe that the ability to dominate, manage, or orchestrate everything in their lives is the mark of resilience. But control is often born of fear. It is fear that makes us clutch to things that no longer serve us. It is fear that tells us, if I let this go, I will lose myself. It is fear that convinces us, if I don't control this, I won't survive. But strength is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to walk through it. Vulnerability is that willingness. It is standing in the middle of your fear and saying, I will not let this define me. I will not let this stop me. I will choose courage over comfort, even if it means stepping into the unknown. That is strength. And there is something profoundly human about choosing vulnerability. It is the act of peeling away the armor and allowing yourself to be seen, not as perfect, not as in control, but as real. When we let go of control, we allow others to see us as we are, and in doing so, we invite connection. True connection is not built on perfection, it is built on authenticity. People do not connect with the image of us that has everything figured out. They connect with the parts of us that are honest, messy, and human. Vulnerability is the bridge to this kind of connection, and it is only when we stop controlling and start allowing that we build relationships of depth and meaning. Letting go, then, is not just about releasing what we cannot control. It is about embracing the vulnerability that comes with it. It is about acknowledging that we will be uncomfortable, that we may feel exposed, and that life may not go as planned. But in that discomfort lies the possibility of growth. In that exposure lies the chance to be truly seen. In that unpredictability lies the beauty of becoming. Vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is the courage to step into the unknown and trust that we will find our way, even if the path is unclear. So when life asks you to let go, when it asks you to release the job, the relationship, the expectation, the outcome, remember this. It is not a test of your weakness, but a call to your strength. It is a call to stand vulnerable in the face of uncertainty, and to trust that you will not only survive but grow. It is a call to lay down the heavy weight of control and to walk lightly into a future that may be uncertain, but is alive with possibility. Vulnerability is the key, the doorway, and the path. And when you have the courage to choose it, you will discover that letting go is not the end of your strength, but the revelation of it. There is a quiet kind of bravery that often goes unnoticed in this world. And that bravery is the courage to surrender. So often we equate surrender with giving up. We think surrender means failure, weakness, or a lack of perseverance. We imagine surrender as the act of throwing in the towel when things get too hard. But true surrender, the kind that allows us to grow, is not about weakness at all. It is about strength. It is about choosing to release what is no longer in our power to hold. It is about having the courage to loosen our grip on the things that keep us bound, trusting that something greater is waiting for us on the other side of release. And it takes far more courage to surrender than it does to cling to something that is already slipping away. When we refuse to surrender, we waste precious energy. We fight against reality, trying to force outcomes, people, or circumstances into shapes they were never meant to take. We convince ourselves that if we hold tighter, push harder, or struggle longer, we can bend the situation to our will. But the truth is, some things are not meant to be controlled. Some things are not meant to stay. Some seasons are designed to end. And it takes courage to see that truth and to lay down the burden of holding on. The courage to surrender is not a passive act. It is a conscious decision to release, to trust, and to allow life to unfold as it was meant to. It is one of the bravest things we can ever do. Think about how much of our suffering comes from resistance. We resist change because it makes us uncomfortable. We resist endings because they feel painful. We resist uncertainty because it threatens the illusion of control we cling to so desperately. And yet, life itself is change. Life itself is a series of beginnings and endings, of seasons and transitions, of rising and falling. When we resist, we suffer, not because life is cruel, but because we are clinging to something that is already moving away from us. The courage to surrender is what breaks that cycle of suffering. It is the moment we unclench our fists and open our hands. It is the choice to stop resisting what is, and to accept the truth that some things are not meant to be carried any longer. And make no mistake, surrender is not easy. It is not comfortable. It feels unnatural, because our instinct is to protect ourselves by holding on. We want certainty. We want control. We want to know that if we just do enough, say enough, or fight enough, everything will work out the way we imagined. But courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage means we act despite the fear. Courage means we are willing to walk into the unknown, even trembling, even uncertain, because we know that holding on will cost us more than letting go ever could. To surrender is to trust that even though the ground beneath us feels shaky, life has a way of catching us when we fall. The courage to surrender is an act of profound faith. Not necessarily religious faith, but the faith that life itself is trustworthy. It is the belief that we do not always have to be in control for things to work out. It is the understanding that sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves is to stop forcing and start flowing. And this faith is not blind. It is born of experience. Every one of us has been through seasons where we thought the end of something would break us. But when we surrendered, we found that what came next was more beautiful, more aligned, and more life-giving than what we had before. We discover again and again that surrender opens doors that resistance keeps shut. And yet, surrender is also one of the most misunderstood forms of courage. People will tell you to never give up, to fight until the end, to refuse to quit. And yes, there are times when perseverance is necessary. But perseverance is not the same as control. There is a difference between staying committed to your values, your dreams, and your truth, and clinging desperately to things that are no longer meant for you. Sometimes courage looks like persistence, but other times courage looks like surrender. The wisdom is knowing which is which. It takes strength to keep fighting, but it takes even greater strength to stop fighting when the battle is no longer yours to win. When we surrender, we are not abandoning hope. We are redirecting it. We are not losing faith, we are deepening it. We are not becoming weaker, we are becoming freer. To surrender is to trust the timing of your life. It is to trust that if a door closes, it is because there is another door waiting to be opened. It is to trust that even though you cannot see the entire path ahead, every step you take in surrender is guiding you toward growth. And this kind of trust, this kind of surrender, is one of the bravest acts of the human spirit. Surrender also transforms our relationships. How often do we try to control others, their choices, their actions, their emotions? We hold on to the idea that if we just say the right words or make the right moves, we can change people. But the truth is, people are not ours to control. They are not ours to mold. They are not ours to force into alignment with our expectations. And when we surrender, when we release the grip of control, we give others the freedom to be themselves. We stop trying to shape them into what we want and start seeing them for who they really are. That kind of surrender takes courage, because it asks us to risk disappointment. But in return, it gives us relationships that are more authentic, more honest, and more deeply connected. The courage to surrender also allows us to heal. When we cling to resentment, pain, or the need for revenge, we keep ourselves chained to our wounds. But when we surrender the need to control the past, when we release the anger we've been holding and stop rehearsing the hurts in our minds, we open ourselves to peace. Healing cannot happen in the clenched fist of control. Healing only happens when we surrender, when we let go, when we choose freedom over bitterness. It is an act of courage to say, I will not let this pain define me anymore. That surrender is not weakness. It is the bravest decision you can make for your soul. So if you find yourself in a season where you are holding on tightly, ask yourself, what would it look like to surrender? What would it look like to release the outcome you are trying so hard to control? What would it look like to trust that even without your constant effort, life has a way of working out? And can you find the courage to take that step? Can you find the courage to unclench your fists, to open your hands, and to let go? Because here is the truth: surrender is not the end of your strength. It is the proof of it. It is not a loss, it is a gain. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. To surrender is to honor yourself enough to release what is breaking you, to free yourself from the fight that is no longer worth fighting, and to open yourself to the beauty of what comes next. That is what courage looks like. That is the courage to surrender. Trusting the process is one of the hardest lessons we face in life, because it requires us to live with patience in a world that constantly demands quick answers and instant results. We live in a time where everything is measured by speed, fast decisions, fast communication, fast outcomes. And yet, the most meaningful parts of life, the most transformative parts of life, rarely unfold quickly. They take time. They unfold slowly, often in silence, often in places we cannot see. Trusting the process is the willingness to believe that growth, healing, and transformation are happening even when we cannot measure them, even when we cannot explain them, and even when we cannot control them. It is the faith to know that just because we don't see the fruit yet does not mean the seed is not growing underground. When we let go of control, we are left in the in-between. That in-between is uncomfortable. It is the space where we no longer have the security of the old, but do not yet have the clarity of the new. It is the waiting room of life, where our instincts scream for answers and solutions, but all we can do is breathe and wait. And in that waiting, something sacred happens. Life begins to work on us in ways that are invisible. Trusting the process is choosing to believe that the waiting is not wasted, that the silence is not empty, that the delay is not denial. It is choosing to believe that even in the stillness, even in the uncertainty, we are being shaped for something greater. The difficulty comes from our desire to control timing. We want to know when. We want to know how. We want to know what the outcome will be, and we want to know now. Our minds are restless, our hearts impatient, and our culture reinforces this idea that anything delayed must be wrong or broken. But trusting the process means stepping away from that narrative. It means believing that just because something takes longer than expected does not mean it will never happen. A flower does not bloom the day after the seed is planted. The seed must sit in the darkness of the soil, unseen, buried, watered by time before the first sprout appears. If we were to dig up the soil every day looking for progress, we would destroy the very thing we are waiting for. Life works the same way. We cannot keep digging into our process, demanding answers before they are ready. We must allow the seed to grow in its own time, in its own way. That is what trusting the process really means. But let's be honest, trusting the process is frightening. It demands surrender of our control. It demands faith in a timeline that is not ours. It demands courage to face the unknown without guarantees. And so often in that space, we feel vulnerable. We feel exposed. We feel like everything is crumbling. But here is the paradox. It is often when we feel like everything is falling apart that something new is quietly coming together. We cannot see it, but it is happening. We cannot name it, but it is real. Trusting the process asks us to walk forward, even when the road is hidden, to keep moving even when the next step is not lit, to trust that there is a design, even when we cannot see the pattern. And here is another truth. The process is rarely neat. Growth is messy. Healing is messy. Transformation is messy. It doesn't follow the straight line we imagine. Instead, it comes with setbacks, detours, disappointments, and delays. We may feel like we are moving backward at times. We may question whether we are making any progress at all. But the process is not about perfection. It is about movement. It is about trusting that even when you stumble, even when you feel lost, even when you take a wrong turn, life is still guiding you. The process includes the missteps, the failures, and the tears just as much as it includes the victories and breakthroughs. Every single part of it is shaping you into who you are becoming. When we resist the process, when we fight against the waiting, when we demand certainty, we often end up prolonging our own growth. We rush decisions we are not ready to make. We cling to situations we should have released. We force outcomes that are not aligned with us. And in doing so, we create unnecessary pain. Trusting the process frees us from this cycle. It allows us to take a step back, to breathe, to say, I don't have to have all the answers right now. I don't have to force this. I can allow things to unfold in their time. That kind of trust brings peace. It doesn't remove the discomfort of waiting, but it softens it. It gives us room to rest instead of striving. Trusting the process also teaches us humility. It reminds us that we are not the ultimate architects of everything in our lives. We can plant seeds, we can water them, we can nurture the soil, but we cannot force them to grow. Life has its own rhythm, its own timing, its own wisdom. And when we align ourselves with that rhythm, instead of fighting against it, we discover a deeper flow. We learn to move with life instead of against it. That flow does not mean everything becomes easy. It means we stop exhausting ourselves with resistance. We stop swimming against the current, and we start allowing ourselves to be carried by the river toward the place we are meant to go. Another gift of trusting the process is resilience. When you learn to wait, when you learn to endure seasons of uncertainty, when you learn to accept setbacks as part of the journey, you build a resilience that cannot be shaken. You stop being crushed by every delay. You stop giving up at the first sign of difficulty. You learn to bend without breaking, to wait without despairing, to walk forward without answers. That resilience becomes a strength you carry into every part of your life. It becomes the foundation on which your future is built. Because you have learned that patience does not mean passivity. It means strength under control. It means you are strong enough to wait, strong enough to trust, strong enough to believe in the unseen. And finally, trusting the process connects us to hope. Hope is not a guarantee of when or how something will happen. Hope is the quiet belief that no matter what, something good can come from this. Hope is the light that keeps us moving in the dark. Trusting the process and holding on to hope are intertwined, because without hope we give up in the waiting, and without trust we destroy ourselves with anxiety. Together, hope and trust carry us through the hardest seasons, reminding us that just because we cannot see the end of the road does not mean the road isn't leading us somewhere meaningful. So when life places you in the in-between, when you are waiting, when you are uncertain, when you are tempted to force answers or rush outcomes, I urge you to pause, breathe, remind yourself that the seed grows unseen. Remind yourself that the flower blooms in its own time. Remind yourself that what feels like delay may be preparation. Trust that the process is working even in silence, even in stillness, even in darkness. Because the truth is, the process is not your enemy. It is your teacher. And if you trust it, you will find that every step, every stumble, every moment of waiting is shaping you into exactly who you were meant to become. There is a kind of freedom that can only be found when we release what no longer serves us. A freedom that cannot be discovered through control, achievement, or even success. It is the freedom that comes when we finally let go of what we have been carrying for too long. The bitterness, the regret, the expectations, the relationships, the fears, the outcomes we cling to so tightly. The act of release is not about giving up. It is about giving ourselves permission to live without the constant weight of things that were never meant to be ours forever. And when we learn to release, we discover that freedom is not something we chase. It is something that emerges naturally when our hands are no longer full of the things we were never meant to hold. So much of our suffering is tied to our inability to let go. We hold on to grudges, thinking that if we stay angry long enough, the pain will lessen, or the other person will suffer for what they did. But in reality, holding on to resentment keeps us chained to the very hurt we wish to escape. The freedom of release is not about excusing what happened, nor is it about denying the pain. It is about saying, I refuse to carry this any longer. I will not allow this pain to occupy my heart and dictate my future. When we release resentment, we do not lose. We gain. We gain energy, peace, and the ability to create new chapters without dragging the old ones into them. The same is true of fear. How often do we grip our fears so tightly that we allow them to shape our choices, our dreams, and even our relationships? Fear whispers to us, if you let go, you will fall. If you step forward, you will fail. If you try, you will be rejected. And so we hold back. We hold on to the comfort of the familiar, even if the familiar is suffocating us. But freedom comes only when we release that fear. To release fear is not to pretend it doesn't exist. It is to acknowledge it and then decide that it will not rule us. Fear may walk beside us, but it does not get to drive the car. When we release the need to always play it safe, we open ourselves to possibilities that fear could never allow us to see. And then there are the expectations. Expectations we put on ourselves, expectations handed to us by family, by culture, by society. We measure ourselves against standards that were never truly ours, striving to be perfect, striving to please, striving to achieve a life that looks good on the outside, but leaves us empty on the inside. The chains of expectation can feel so heavy, and yet we carry them as if they are our duty. But freedom through release comes when we say, I will no longer carry the weight of who the world tells me I must be. I will no longer live my life in the shadow of someone else's approval. I will release the need to be perfect, and instead I will choose to be whole. That release is liberating. It allows us to embrace who we are, not who we think we must be. It gives us the freedom to live authentically, to step into the fullness of our true selves without apology. We also cling to relationships long past their season, convinced that letting go would mean failure or abandonment. We hold on because we fear loneliness, or because we hope for change, or because we have tied our identity so tightly to another person that we do not know who we are without them. But not all relationships are meant to last forever. Some come to teach us lessons, some come to guide us for a time, and some come to show us parts of ourselves we would not have discovered otherwise. The freedom of release comes when we honor what a relationship gave us, but recognize that it may no longer have a place in our future. Letting go of someone does not always mean we stop loving them. It means we love ourselves enough to no longer remain where we are not valued, nourished, or aligned. And in that release, we create space for healthier, more fulfilling connections to enter our lives. Releasing outcomes is another act of freedom that we often resist. We plan, we dream, we imagine, and we create visions of how life is supposed to unfold. But when reality doesn't match our vision, we cling to the plan instead of adapting to the moment. We resist the outcome because it doesn't look like what we expected. Yet life is not lived in the rigid structure of our plans. It is lived in the unfolding of the unexpected. Freedom comes when we release the outcome. When we say, even if it doesn't turn out the way I imagined, I will trust that it is still leading me where I need to be. In that release, we discover that sometimes the things we thought we wanted most were not the things that would bring us life. Sometimes what we receive instead is far greater than what we planned. Releasing is not a one-time act, it is a practice. Again and again, life will ask us to lay down what we are gripping. And again, we will face the temptation to hold on a little longer. Release takes courage. Release takes trust. But release is also what makes us free. The tighter we grip, the heavier life feels. The more we release, the lighter we become. Freedom is not about having control over everything. It is about realizing we don't need to. It is about discovering that when our hands are no longer clenched around what we cannot control, they are open to receive what life is waiting to give us. Freedom through release also allows us to live in the present. When we are weighed down by the past, by regrets, by pain, by things we wish we could change. We cannot fully live in the now. When we are obsessed with the future, by outcomes, by expectations, by control, we cannot enjoy what is in front of us. Release is the key to presence. It allows us to set down what is behind us and what is ahead of us, and to be fully alive in this moment. And in the present moment, life is rich, beautiful, and full of gifts we often overlook. So, what does it look like to embrace freedom through release? It looks like forgiving yourself for mistakes you cannot undo. It looks like walking away from a relationship that no longer aligns with your soul. It looks like releasing the need to be perfect and choosing to show up as you are. It looks like letting go of the dream you once had so you can open yourself to the dream that is unfolding now. It looks like choosing peace over control, authenticity over approval, and joy over fear. And here is the miracle: the moment you release, you will feel the weight lift. It may not happen instantly, and it may not erase the pain, but slowly, steadily. You will feel yourself breathing easier. You will feel the chains loosening. You will feel the space opening in your heart for new beginnings. That is the freedom of release. It does not erase the past, but it frees you from being imprisoned by it. It does not guarantee a perfect future, but it gives you the courage to step into it with open hands. So today, ask yourself, what are you holding on to that is holding you back? What weight are you carrying that was never meant to be yours forever? What would your life look like if you chose to release it? Because on the other side of that release is freedom. Freedom to live, to love, to grow, and to become the person you were always meant to be. And that kind of freedom is worth everything. We live in a world that constantly tells us perfection is the goal. From the moment we are young, we are handed images of what success should look like, what beauty should look like, what achievement should look like, what a perfect life should look like. And without even realizing it, we begin to measure ourselves against standards that are impossible to reach. We believe that if we can just get everything right, if we can present ourselves without flaws, if we can control every detail, then maybe, just maybe, we will be worthy of love, belonging, and acceptance. But perfection is an illusion. It is a moving target that can never be reached. And the more we chase it, the more exhausted, disconnected, and empty we become. The invitation life gives us is not to be perfect, but to be whole. Wholeness is not about flawless performance. It is about authentic living. It is about embracing every part of who we are, the strong and the broken, the light and the dark, the joy and the pain. Choosing wholeness over perfection is the path to real freedom, real connection, and real growth. When we pursue perfection, we are never satisfied. No matter what we achieve, it never feels like enough. We get the job, but there is always a better one. We finish the project, but we immediately see its flaws. We receive praise, but we wonder if people would still love us if they knew the truth about our fears, our failures, or our hidden struggles. Perfection creates a cycle of endless striving without rest, endless effort without peace. But wholeness interrupts that cycle. Wholeness says, you don't need to be flawless to be worthy. You don't need to have it all together to deserve love. You don't need to present yourself as perfect to belong. Wholeness embraces imperfection as part of the human experience, not as something to be hidden or erased. Wholeness is the courage to tell the truth about yourself. It is the willingness to say, yes, I am strong, but I am also struggling. Yes, I am capable, but I am also afraid. Yes, I have victories, but I also carry scars. Perfection denies half of your story, but wholeness allows you to live your story fully. And in that fullness, you discover freedom. You no longer have to pretend. You no longer have to hide. You no longer have to wear a mask. You can breathe again because you are living honestly, not performing endlessly. Choosing wholeness over perfection also deepens our relationships. When we strive for perfection, We disconnect from others because perfection creates walls. It says, I cannot let you see the real me, because if you did, you would not love me. And so we cover our flaws, we suppress our struggles, and we project an image that keeps others at a distance. But real intimacy, real connection, is only possible when we let people see us as we are. Wholeness says, here I am, messy and imperfect, but real. And when we show up that way, we give others permission to do the same. Relationships built on perfection are fragile, but relationships built on wholeness are strong, because they are rooted in truth, not image. The pursuit of perfection also robs us of joy. Think of how many times you have accomplished something only to immediately critique it, minimize it, or compare it to someone else's achievement. Perfection whispers, it's not good enough. You're not good enough. But wholeness allows us to celebrate progress, not just flawless results. It allows us to see beauty in the process, not just in the outcome. It allows us to experience gratitude for where we are, instead of constantly longing for where we think we should be. Wholeness does not deny the desire to grow or improve. It simply removes the pressure to prove your worth through achievement. It allows growth to be a journey of discovery instead of a desperate race toward approval. Perfection is fueled by fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. But wholeness is grounded in acceptance. Acceptance of our humanity, acceptance of our limits, acceptance of our messy, beautiful, unfinished selves. And here's the truth, the people who inspire us most are not the ones who look perfect. They are the ones who are real. They are the ones who share their struggles, admit their failures, and show us that it is possible to live fully without living flawlessly. Perfection may impress others, but wholeness connects us to them, and connection is what our souls truly crave. Choosing wholeness over perfection also reshapes the way we see failure. Perfection sees failure as the end, as evidence that we are not good enough. Wholeness sees failure as part of the journey, as a teacher, as an opportunity to grow. When you are committed to perfection, failure is devastating because it shatters the illusion you've worked so hard to maintain. But when you are committed to wholeness, failure is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be embraced. It is proof that you are trying, that you are learning, that you are alive. Wholeness makes room for mistakes because it understands that mistakes are not the opposite of growth. They are the evidence of it. Wholeness also changes how we see ourselves in relation to others. Perfection thrives on comparison. It pushes us to measure our worth against someone else's achievements, beauty, or success. But wholeness frees us from this exhausting competition. When you are whole, you no longer need to prove yourself by outperforming others, because your worth is not up for debate. You can celebrate others' victories without feeling threatened. You can walk your path without needing it to look like anyone else's. Wholeness allows you to live in alignment with your truth, instead of trying to fit yourself into someone else's definition of success. The path to wholeness, however, is not easy. It requires us to unlearn years of conditioning that told us perfection was the goal. It requires us to confront the parts of ourselves we have hidden or denied. It requires us to embrace vulnerability, to admit we don't have it all together, and to stop using control as a way to mask our insecurities. But while it is difficult, it is also liberating. The moment we choose wholeness over perfection, we step into a new kind of freedom. The freedom to be human, the freedom to be authentic, the freedom to live without constantly chasing approval. And the irony is that when we stop chasing perfection, we actually become more powerful. Because wholeness is magnetic. Wholeness draws people in, because it resonates with the deepest part of them, that longs for the same freedom. Wholeness inspires others more than perfection ever could, because it shows them that they too are enough as they are. Perfection tries to make us admired. Wholeness makes us relatable. And in relatability, in authenticity, we find true influence. So the question is this: will you spend your life striving for an impossible standard, exhausting yourself in the endless pursuit of perfection, or will you choose the path of wholeness? Will you choose to show up messy but real, flawed but authentic, imperfect but enough? Because in the end, perfection is empty. It gives us the appearance of control, but leaves us disconnected and unfulfilled. Wholeness, on the other hand, is rich. It fills us with peace, connection, and meaning. It allows us to live not for the image, but for the truth. Wholeness does not demand that you fix yourself before you are worthy. It invites you to embrace yourself as you are and to grow from that place. Wholeness does not require you to be flawless to be loved. It reminds you that love was never meant to be earned by performance. It was meant to be received by being. Wholeness does not ask you to pretend. It asks you to be honest. And in that honesty, in that acceptance, in that authenticity, you will find a freedom that perfection could never offer you. So let us stop chasing the illusion of perfection and instead choose the reality of wholeness. Let us embrace every part of our story, the messy chapters and the triumphant ones, the struggles and the victories, the scars and the beauty. Because when we live whole, we live free. And when we live free, we finally begin to grow into the people we were always meant to be.